Hey everybody! Okay, so where we left off was Ramona had a question about the read aloud story that Miss Binney was reading to the class. So this is on page 23. So Miss Binney smiled at Ramona and said, I like the way Ramona remembers to raise her hand when she has something to say. Yes, Ramona. Ramona's hope soared. Her teacher had smiled at her. Miss Binney, I want to know, how did Mike Mulligan go to the bathroom when he was digging the basement of the town hall? Miss Binney smiled, and it seemed to last longer than smiles usually last. Ramona glanced uneasily around and saw that others were waiting with interest for the answer. Everybody wanted to know how Mike Mulligan went to the bathroom. Well, said Miss Binney at last, I don't really know, Ramona. The book doesn't tell us. I always wanted to know, too, said Howie without raising his hand, and others murmured in agreement. The whole class, it seemed, had been wondering how Mike Mulligan went to the bathroom. Maybe he stopped the steam shovel and climbed out of the hole he was digging and went to a service station, suggested a boy named Eric. He couldn't. The book says he had to work as fast as he could all day, Howie pointed out. It doesn't say he stopped. Miss Binney faced the 29 earnest members of the kindergarten, all of whom wanted to know how Mike Mulligan went to the bathroom. Boys and girls, she began, and spoke in her clear, distinct way. The reason the book does not tell us how Mike Mulligan went to the bathroom is that is not important. It's not an important part of the story. The story is about digging the basement of the town hall, and that is what the book tells us. Miss Binney spoke as if this explanation ended the matter, but the kindergarten was not convinced. Ramona knew that the rest of the class knew that knowing how to go to the bathroom was important. They were surprised that Miss Binney did not understand, because she had just showed them the bathroom the very first thing. Ramona could see there were some things she was not going to learn in school. And along with the rest of the class, she stared reproachfully at Miss Binney. The teacher looked embarrassed, as if she knew something had disappointed her kindergarteners. She recovered quickly, closed the book, and told the class that if they would walk quietly out to the playground, she would teach them a game called Gray Duck. Ramona did not budge. She watched the rest of the class leave the room and admired Susan's boingy-boingy curls as they bounced about her shoulders. But she did not stir from her seat. Only Miss Binney could unstick the imaginary glue that held her there. Don't you want to learn to play Gray Duck, Ramona? Miss Binney asked. Ramona nodded. Yes, but I can't. Why not? Asked Miss Binney. Well, I can't leave my seat. When Miss Binney looked blank, she added, because of the present. What present? Said Miss Binney, seeming so genuinely puzzled that Ramona became uneasy. The teacher sat down in the little chair next to Ramona and said, Tell me why you can't play Gray Duck. Ramona squirmed. Worn out with waiting, she had an uneasy feeling that something had gone wrong someplace. I want to play Gray Duck, but you... She stopped, feeling that she might be about to say the wrong thing. But I what? Said Miss Binney. Well, you said if I sat here, I would get a present, said Ramona at last. But you didn't say how long I had to sit here. If Miss Binney had looked puzzled before, she now looked baffled. Ramona, I don't understand, she began. Yes, you did, said Ramona, nodding. You told me to sit here for the present, and I've been sitting here ever since school started, and you haven't given me a present. Miss Binney's face turned red, and she looked so embarrassed that Ramona felt completely confused. Teachers were not supposed to look that way. Miss Binney spoke gently. Ramona, I'm afraid we've had a misunderstanding. Ramona was blunt. You mean I don't get a present? I'm afraid not, admitted Miss Binney. You see, for the present means now. I meant that I wanted you to sit here now because later I may have the children sit at different desks. Oh. Ramona was so disappointed she had nothing to say. Words were so puzzling. Present should mean a present. By now, all the children were crowding around the door to see what had happened to their teacher. I'm so sorry, said Miss Binney. It's all my fault. I should have used different words. That's all right, said Ramona, ashamed to have the class see that she was not going to get a present after all. All right, class, said Miss Binney briskly. Let's go outside and play Gray Duck. You too, Ramona. Gray Duck turned out to be an easy game, and Ramona's spirits recovered quickly from her disappointment. The class formed a circle at the person who was it, and the person who was it tagged someone who had to chase him around the circle. If it was caught before he got back to the empty space in the circle, he had to go to the center of the circle, which was called the mush pot, and the person who caught him became it. Ramona tried to stand next to the girl with the springy curls, but instead she found herself beside Howie. "I thought you were going to get a present," gloated Howie. Ramona merely scowled and made a face at Howie, who was it, but quickly landed in the mush pot because his new jeans were so stiff they slowed him right down. "Look at Howie in the mush pot," crowed Ramona. Howie looked as if he were about to cry, which Ramona thought was silly of him. Only a baby would cry in the mush pot. Me, somebody tag me," thought Ramona, jumping up and down. She longed for a turn to run around the circle. Susan was jumping up and down too, and her curls bobbed enticingly. At last, Ramona felt a tap on her shoulder. Her turn had come to run around the circle. She ran as fast as she could to catch up with the sneakers pounding on the asphalt ahead of her. The boing boing curls were on the other side of the circle. Ramona was coming closer to them. She put out her hand. She took hold of a curl, a thick, springy curl. "Yow!" screamed the owner of the curls. Startled, Ramona let go. She was so surprised by the scream that she forgot to watch Susan's curl spring back. Susan clutched her curls with one hand and pointed at Ramona with the other. "That girl pulled my hair!" "Ow, ow, ow!" Ramona felt that Susan did not have to be so touchy. She had not meant to hurt her. She only wanted to touch that beautiful springy hair that was so different from her own straight brown hair. "Ow, ow, ow!" shrieked Susan, the center of everyone's attention. "Baby," said Ramona. "Ramona," said Miss Binney, in our kindergarten, we do not pull hair." "Susan doesn't have to be such a baby," said Ramona. "You may go sit on the bench outside the door while the rest of us play our game," Miss Binney told Ramona. Ramona did not want to sit on any bench. She wanted to play Grey Duck with the rest of the class. "No," said Ramona, preparing to make a great big noisy fuss. "I won't." Susan stopped shrieking. A terrible silence fell over the playground, and everyone stared at Ramona in such a way that she almost felt as if she were beginning to shrink. Nothing like this had ever happened to her before. "Ramona," said Miss Binney quietly, "go sit on the bench." Without another word, Ramona walked across the playground and sat down on the bench by the door of the kindergarten. The game of Grey Duck continued without her, but the class had not forgotten her. Howie grinned in her direction, and Susan continued to look injured. Some laughed and pointed at Ramona, and others, particularly Davy, looked worried, as if they had not known such a terrible punishment could be given in kindergarten. Ramona swung her feet and pretended to be watching some workmen who were building a new market across the street. In spite of the misunderstanding about the present, she wanted so much to be loved by her pretty new teacher. Tears came into Ramona's eyes, but she would not cry. Nobody was going to call Ramona Quimby a crybaby. Never. Next door to the kindergarten, two little girls about 4 and 2 years old peered solemnly through the fence at Ramona. "See that girl?" said the other girl to her little sister. "She's sitting there because she's been bad." The 2-year-old looked awed to be in the presence of such wickedness. Ramona stared at the ground. She felt so ashamed. When the game ended, the class filed past Ramona into the kindergarten. "You may come in, Ramona," said Miss Binney pleasantly. Ramona slid off the bench and followed the others. Even though she was not loved, she was forgiven, and that helped. She hoped that learning to read and write came next. Inside, Miss Binney announced that the time had come to rest. This news was another disappointment to Ramona, who felt that anyone who went to kindergarten was too old to rest. Miss Binney gave each child a mat on which there was a picture that matched the picture on his cupboard door, and told him where to spread his mat on the floor. When all 29 children were lying down, they did not rest. They popped up to see what others were doing. They wiggled, they whispered, they coughed. They asked, "How much longer do we have to rest?" "Shh, shh," said Miss Binney in a soft, quiet, sleepy voice. "The person who rests most quietly will get to be the wake-up fairy." "What's the wake-up fairy?" demanded Howie, bobbing up. "Shh," whispered Miss Binney. "The wake-up fairy tiptoes around and wakes up the class with a magic wand. Whoever is the Fairy wakes up the quietest resters first. Ramona made up her mind that she would get to be the wake-up fairy, and then Miss Binny would know she was not so bad after all. She laid flat on her back with her hands tight on her sides. The mat was thin and the floor was hard, but Ramona did not wiggle. She was sure she must be the best rester in the class, because she could hear others squirming around on their mat. And just to show Miss Binny she really truly was resting, she gave one little snore. Not a loud snore, but a delicate snore, to prove what a good rester she was. A scatter of giggles rose from the class, followed by several snores, less delicate than Ramona's. They led to more and less delicate snores until everyone was snoring, except the few who did not know how to snore. They were giggling. Miss Binny clapped her hands and spoke in a voice that was no longer soft, quiet, and sleepy. "All right, boys and girls," she said, "this is enough. We do not snore or giggle during rest time." "Ramona started it," said Howie. Ramona sat up and scowled at Howie. "Tattletale," she said in a voice of scorn. Across Howie, she saw that Susan was lying quietly with her beautiful curls spread out on the mat and her eyes screwed tight shut. "Well, you did," said Howie. "Children," Miss Binny's voice was sharp, "we must rest so that we will not be tired when our mothers come to take us home." "Is your mother coming to take you home?" Howie asked Miss Binny. Ramona had been wondering the same thing. "That's enough, Howie." Miss Binny spoke the way mothers sometimes speak just before dinner time. In a moment, she was back to her soft, sleepy voice. "I like the way Susan is resting so quietly," she said. "Susan, you may be the wake-up fairy and tap the boys and girls with this wand to wake them up." The magic wand turned out to be nothing but an everyday yardstick. Ramona laid quietly, but her efforts were of no use. Susan, with her curls bouncing about her shoulders, tapped Ramona last. It's not fair, Ramona thought. She was not the worst rester in the class. Howie was much worse. The rest of the morning went quickly, and class was allowed to explore the paints and the toys, and those who wanted to were allowed to draw with their new crayons. They did not, however, learn to read and write. But Ramona cheered up when Miss Binny explained that everyone who had anything to share with the class could bring it to school the next day for show and tell. Ramona was glad when the bell finally rang and she saw her mother waiting for her outside the fence. Mrs. Kemp and Willa Jean were waiting for Howie too, and the five started home together. Right away, Howie said, "Ramona got benched and she's the worst rester in class." After all that had happened that morning, Ramona found this to be too much. "Why don't you shut up?" she yelled at Howie just before she hit him. Mrs. Quimby seized Ramona by the hand and dragged her away from Howie. "Now, Ramona," she said, and her voice was firm, "this is no way to behave on your first day of school." "Poor little girl," said Mrs. Kemp. "She's worn out." Nothing infuriated Ramona more than having a grown-up say, as if she could not hear, that she was worn out. "I am not worn out," she shrieked. "She got plenty of rest while she was benched," said Howie. "Now, Howie, you stay out of this," she said. Then, to change the subject, she asked her son, "How did you like the kindergarten?" "Oh, I guess it's all right," said Howie without enthusiasm. "They don't have any dirt to dig in or tricycles to ride on." "What about you, Ramona?" asked Mrs. Quimby. "Did you like kindergarten?" Ramona considered. Kindergarten had not turned out as she had expected. Still, even though she had not been given a present, and Miss Binny did not love her, she had liked being with the boys and girls her own age. She liked singing the song about the Donzer and having her own little cupboard. "I didn't like it as much as I thought I would," she answered honestly, "but maybe it will get better when we have show and tell." Chapter 2 is called Show and Tell. What do you think Ramona's going to bring? Something appropriate? Not appropriate? Something that's hers? Something that's not hers? What are you thinking about? Okay, well, that's our read aloud for today. We stopped on page 41 in the beginning of chapter 2. So I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll be doing some math videos later so that if there's any questions about what you need to do or how to get on, you can do that. We're going to go on to the Advisions site for math, and you can just do it in your book, or you can go online. I'm going to assign the visual learning video, so if you want to watch the video again for the lesson, you can. And we'll do some other videos today too. All right? Have a great day, you guys. Happy Tuesday. See you soon.